What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. You are back with another live edition of the Ad Podcast. And today we have a great guest for you guys. We have Jonathan Haber. Jonathan is co-founder of Giant Spoon, where he helps lead ambitious award-winning work for clients like General Electric, Netflix, and Microsoft, to name a few. Prior to that, he ran innovation at OMD and other big agencies. Giant Spoon is a #1 winner for Fast Company's Most Innovative Companies in the advertising category, was named MediaPost Independent Agency of the Year, and has a couple of recent statues to add to the trophy case that we'll get into later in the show. But John, thanks, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Let's go. So, I talked a little bit about your background, but a lot of viewers to the show are either young folks trying to break in, they're interested in the creative space, and I always like to learn a little bit about people's origin story. So I know we chatted a little bit about it off camera, but you grew up in San Diego. How'd you get into the business?
Yeah, I mean, my path was not a clean one. I did not go to ad school. I had to drop out of law school to find my way.
Wow, let's go. I know a few stories like that.
Yeah, and ended up at a PR firm at Rogers and Cowan, doing sort of helping brands find their way into the entertainment space, but at a really, really junior level. But then I learned what a holding company was and started to kind of make my way around the holding company world. But I ended up at a media agency, which was Initiative. This must have been like 2002. And it was around the time when TiVo had just become a thing. And people were panicking in the industry that nobody would ever watch a commercial again. Nevertheless, here we are in 2025. People are still watching commercials. Granted, there's been some dramatic change since then, but the panic was overrated. But what that did for me in my career was it created an opportunity to sort of raise my hand as a young person who, at the time, I was in biz dev and PR for the agency. And I sort of raised my hand with a couple others and said, hey, if no one's going to watch a commercial again, can you let us go create a skunkworks to figure out what else brands can do to connect with people if TV is dead? So they did, and we created like an innovations skunk work. And basically I spent my career doing iterations of that. So in those days, there were no smartphones and there was no social media, but there were podcasts that were starting to emerge on iPods, and there were GPS things in flip phones, and there were YouTube was just emerging, and so the digital world was just emerging, and we were just playing with new technologies, trying to invent ways for brands to come to life. And then the world kept changing really quickly, and we just were taking advantage of every new thing as it came along, not so much through the lens of building a whole infrastructure around digital, but creative ideas in every new technology and every new platform and every new cultural thing that was happening. We were coming up with ideas how brands could take advantage of it. And I did that for over a decade, both at Interpublic and then at Omnicom. And then through a series of things, decided that all of those really cool things that we were building businesses around, branded entertainment, experiential, how brands integrate into gaming, partnering with talent, creating original products, whatever it was, we felt those things were kind of the cool stuff around the edges in a holding company environment. And about 11, 12 years ago when we started Giant Spoon, we said, hey, what if those things were the core of how you strategically think about building a brand? And that's when we went out on our own and started the agency.
I love it. And then you left with all partners from OMD, right, at the time?
Yeah, so it was a few of us from OMD, and we built the Ignition Factory group there, which was just the name of that innovation, Skunkworks, as well as sort of like helping globalize that. And so we all kind of stepped out together. I think the interesting thing is, looking back now, what Giant Spoon's become, which is really a full service agency, which kind of happened organically. It wasn't exactly the plan from the beginning, is that me and my partners actually never held a traditional advertising job in all of that time, because it was always these innovation teams. So none of us were account people. We weren't creatives. We weren't strategists. We weren't media planners. But we were playing in all those spheres. And that ended up being a little bit of a superpower of Giant Spoon to kind of say, we're not beholden to any one part of the advertising ecosystem. And we see all of it as opportunity and all of it as a canvas for creativity. And it let us play in all of those different areas. And I hope that's a calling card of Giant Spoon, that we're able to execute and think in every possible format and platform.
Yeah, I love that. I love that concept, that especially that none of you guys had traditional advertising roles, even within those large agency environments. And that was kind of, whether that was by purpose or by design, that ended up being a killer app for you guys. And I think that informs a lot of your creative philosophy, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I'm curious, about that kind of inception point of when you guys decided to break out on your own, because, it's common. Sometimes it happens because people get laid off. Sometimes people, do it more proactively. But, 10 years inside a big agency and big holding companies, it's a bold move to step out. It's risky. It's a career defining moment. What was the impetus for it? Like, what was that burning itch inside of you where you're just like, you know what, I think it's better for us to go out and do this thing on our own and try and build something?
I think we spend so much time in the big holding company world, especially because we built these innovation teams inside of the media agency landscape, fighting to go upstream with these brands and fighting to sort of say, hey, let us take a bigger seat at the table to tell you how we think a modern brand can be built. But we were a piece of such a big machine that it ended up being a lot of like, cool idea here, cool idea there, cool idea there, instead of, hey, we have a strategy that's going to build your brand over 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years. It's going to incorporate all parts of the marketing ecosystem, but it's going to also take advantage of so many different new formats and new ways to communicate with people. And we just couldn't do it the way we wanted to from where we were sitting. So that was a frustration that was driving it. I think the confidence maybe came from the fact that we spent so much time with so many big brands that we knew how they worked and we knew how to get into those systems. And I was running P&Ls inside of that for these innovation groups. So I'm no MBA, but I knew enough about sort of the business side of things. So I couldn't have done this without having done that first. And I think all of those factors at once. And then I felt this gravity that what we were doing either had to kind of be globalized, or I would sort of be stuck kind of doing these, one-off things for a long time. And I didn't really want to travel around the world inside of a holding company and globalize this service offering. And I didn't even know if all the countries even wanted it. And it was going to be a long road. So we kind of, that gave us enough points to decide to go off. And then luckily we had such a great relationship with GE that and Omnicom, invested in us in those early days when we left. So we were able to continue to work with GE from day one. So we had a client from day one, and we had sort of Omnicom backing us, even if just with a small financial investment. So all those things really sort of powered our confidence to kind of jump and do it. It still was scary, and it was still a couple of years without making really any salary. And I had just bought my first home, and it was scary. Wow. But it ended up working out, and we did well in those first years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I never knew that insight, that you guys actually had Omnicom's blessing, that they put capital into you guys. I always wondered how that worked, because I knew GE was a client of Omnicom back in that time. And you watch Mad Men, and you see the ever changing, like, guys walking out with the file cabinets and stuff, to start up new shops. And like, not ever being part of, I've been part of agencies at the startup phase, but never leaving something big to start something small. So I was always curious about how that all worked out. So thank you for sharing.
It worked out. I got a patch of gray hair around then, my first batch, but we made it.
Let's go. Awesome. Okay. I wanted to actually ask you another origin story question. So, the name Giant Spoon has always fascinated me. I think branding and agency is important work. Some people just put their names on the door. Some have, cooler names, but Giant Spoon has always really stood out to me. I can tell you what always comes to mind for me is the spoons, like in the Matrix movie, when like the spoons are melting, and like it's kind of like a motif within the Matrix films. I don't know why that imagery has always come to me when your guys' names come up, but I was just curious from your point of view, not knowing the origin story, why the name Giant Spoon, and what does that say, more broadly about the culture that you guys have built over the years?
Yeah, I was reflecting on it just this week because I saw that David Droga is stepping down from his role at Accenture
Mm,
in the news,
yep.
and it kind of occurred. I think it was in the article, but it occurred to me that he's one of the last great sort of, his name was the agency,
Hmm.
and I don't think people do it anymore. But maybe they do, but not as common. But for us, we knew we wanted to have something a little weird, and we believed that weird was going to be the type of like vibe of the agency: quirky, clever, weird, and the name fit that. We also had kind of joked that one day we would walk out of our jobs. This is before we had the courage to do it, and we just open up a coffee shop with a boutique agency upstairs, and it was sort of a name that was good for a coffee shop and an ad agency, and we were like, the world definitely doesn't need another coffee shop, and the world definitely doesn't need another ad agency, but we're doing it. So it kind of fit with that. And then what we realized, because we had done a lot of self-reflection after the first few years, was that what this agency was really about was stirring things up, and we say stir shit up. And then there was this aha moment where, what do you need to stir shit up? You need a giant spoon, and that was
Mm.
really kind of solidified the core of the name. And so we have stir shit up signs on our walls, and it's not something that's like part of our. It actually is in some of our social media headers and stuff, but it's really a philosophy that we sort of ask ourselves: is the way we're working and the work we're doing stirring shit up, and that's core to the culture of Giant Spoon.
Yeah, and I read something else that I thought was a clever like playoff in another interview. You guys have a creative philosophy, and I think this maybe harkens back to the idea that a lot of the folks who left to initially start the core group were not traditional ad people. You guys have a belief that creativity can come from anywhere. You
Mhm.
don't isolate the creative ideation around campaign ideas or just creativity in general to just people with those types of traditional backgrounds. Of course, there's a lot of rigor and process and stuff that you guys would put into place, which you would consider, traditional from an agency perspective, but you don't limit it just to those creative execs. And you also have something that you guys call a spoon shot, which I loved, which kind of is a play off, would imagine, Google's culture of the moonshot.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what the spoon shot is and how that actually comes to fruition? I've heard some stuff about a Slack channel where it's kind of free association. People, do put whatever ideas they have or whatever things that they're seeing in there. And then I also read something about I can't remember if the spoon shot was kind of tied to it or not, but kind of a budget that you guys make available to employees to get them outside of their normal core center their box, like go to an opera if that's something you've never done, or go see the X Games, or do things to challenge your creative framework and get outside of your own four walls, so to speak. I know that was a mouthful, but if you could expand on that.
Yeah, the spoon shot it's not just a like the Google moonshot where it's something that we try to find our one crazy thing a year. It's actually a bit of a philosophy of how we think brands should behave, that they need those spoon shot moments within their advertising ecosystem. And so at our best, we're going to be having one or two spoon shots pitched to and hopefully executed for each of our clients every year. And some of them are bigger than others, but some of them are sort of framed in the context of what's big for that client. But making space for that, teaching our clients that we're going to bring them that type of thinking and not have it just be these, what if we did this or that at the end of a deck, which I always hear when people come to Giant Spoon from other agencies, that they come up with these crazy ideas, like things that we've been able to pull off, like a dragon on the Empire State Building, or building an entire town of Westworld, or winning the Tribeca Film Festival for a brand. Like those things are pitched, and other agencies are fully capable of those things, but sometimes their clients aren't trained on how to evaluate them and how to and how to see them as core to the marketing plan and not just cool what if extras. So that's kind of part of the spoonshot culture with clients. And then over the years, we'd had different internal mechanisms to get our people thinking about those types of spoonshot ideas. And sometimes it was for a while, the Slack channel, I think, has faded away, but there was a Slack channel that was robust for a while where everyone was kind of just either for our clients, for other brands that we could maybe just go send the idea to as a crazy one-off, like what if you did this? Or for ourselves or for nonprofits, we would put things in that channel and try to run with them. That got really hot during COVID. That channel was like blowing up, because we had a lot of time from people and we were looking at brands that might actually be able to do something still when we were fully locked down. Now it's definitely part of our retreat. We kind of pull everyone aside, and we take 2 hours out of our annual retreat, and we have everyone flex that muscle usually for a nonprofit to sort of say, what could we do? What's a big spoon shot? And we get the nonprofit involved. So we make it a part of the culture, but ultimately it's a part of what we want to deliver for clients. And we actually have some data on how spoon shots work when combined with traditional advertising. And I can take you through that too.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Do you have a handy, or is that something you would?
Yeah, no, I can give you the broad strokes. It's actually the beginnings of it is just posted on our Instagram this week. But for HBO, we helped them launch season 2 of House of the Dragon, which just won an Effie, which we're super excited about, and partially because of this data. But I think the data is an even bigger lesson than just this one campaign. And so what we did at a high level for House of the Dragon was sort of take the two kingdoms, the black and green, and pit them against each other, and sort of take New York City and have every iconic bagel shop to iconic pizza shop to iconic bridge to iconic building take a side and put up the banner of one of the two houses. And then that was happening all week. Tons of social content. Sometimes it was real giant banners we were putting up in the world, and sometimes it was CGI and fake, and people didn't know. And that caused all kinds of conversation, like, this is AI. And then people are like, no, it's real. I saw it. And it was this mix of real and AI. And that whole week-long thing of happenings culminated in us actually, for real, wrapping a 270-foot dragon around the spire of the Empire State Building, which in and of itself was just this crazy spoon shot. And there was, at the same time, influencer work. There was trailers dropping, traditional campaign assets coming out. It was this full 360 effort, global as well. And the data, the research that we did that made it even more interesting was, and you'll have to look on our social to get the exact numbers, but the numbers were profound, that people who were exposed to one of the CGI banners or the dragon in real life or in press or on social and saw a traditional ad, their likelihood to watch or their interest and awareness skyrocketed.
Wow.
And if they just saw one or the other, there was a slight increase. When you saw both, it was dramatic. So for us, that just says, whether you're something crazy like a House of the Dragon, like a major piece of IP, or you're a brand, having something that really breaks format, breaks out, is unexpected, is going to surprise people and delight them, and having that work with your traditional advertising, not instead of or in separate worlds, and how do you retarget against those things, is even more effective, and we've started to prove it. We're going to study it even more.
Wow, I love that. I know you guys have often been known for your experiential stunt work. I worked with you guys on some Adobe stuff at VidCon, which was really
Oh yeah,
exciting.
that was fun.
Yeah, you guys always are known for like showing up in the real world, not just in traditional formats and digital. And I love that you have the research to back up the effectiveness, and that you guys are taking home awards for that. But you know, why has that been such a pillar, or part of what you guys have been known for? Is that some would call you guys an experiential agency if they had to maybe put you in a bucket. Of course you guys are so much more than that, and you do much more than that. But why is it so important for you guys to help brands show up in the real world and engage consumers in these kind of stunt moments that generate just massive amounts of social buzz and awareness and
Yeah.
PR and all this other cool stuff?
I think for us, it's always been about playing with formats and creating canvases.
Hmm.
And that's been true. Like we're a full service media planning and buying agency. We
Right.
do, creative, we're creative AORs, and we do experiential. And I think the thing about experiential is that because inherently we're thinking about canvases and breaking formats, and we reinvented what experiential can be. And so that's why it became really famous for us. It started back. I mean, Westworld was uh, if people know of us just a little bit, they maybe know of us from Westworld at South by Southwest, and that was this huge inflection point of sort of fame for the agency. But there was a lot of work like that before that. And it was truly just a new format and a reinvention of what experiential could be. And we were doing the same stuff with media. We were putting Google Cardboard VR headsets in the print edition of the New York Times to tell a GE story. We were creating vignettes on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon for GE, and taking over every ad in the New York Times. So it's always about like formats and canvas, but it just so happened that at that moment in time when we reinvented what the canvas of experiential could be and made it much more immersive, much more narrative driven, much more of a story, it really struck a chord and resonated. But it's a philosophy of how we approach everything from content to media to experiences.
Yeah, I love that idea of making the media almost a stuntable moment in itself. I think I read another article, and I think you just referenced to it with GE, where you guys literally bought every ad in the New York Times. And an ad in the New York Times by itself, that's boring. But I mean, there's probably a crazy cost associated with that, but I imagine the earned media value and just the impact of that in that format is just so much more exciting for clients. And it makes it a story in itself, just the fact that you
Yeah.
bought media in an interesting way.
But it's, and the strategy behind it, there was a story. Uh, our media team likes to say it's one thing to buy an impression, it's another thing to make one. And
Mm,
that's definitely our part of our approach to media. And with the New York Times example, GE was splitting into three companies, and we wanted to tell the business world and Wall Street and culture in general the value of them splitting into three companies, and it's the ability to be hyper focused on what those three different divisions of GE, now three independent companies that trade independently on the stock exchange, could do. And so the story was about focus. And so we were able to, by taking over every ad in the New York Times and making it a fully focused on those three stories, that was, we were able to do that through the ads that we put in there, through the interactive experiences that were built into all those ad units. It was all about focus. And so there's a strategic creative story we're telling through a media canvas and through an innovation in how that media canvas is used as a format.
yeah, I love that. So, I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the traditional approach to innovation in media. It's often been said that you should hold 10% of your budget aside for innovation, or for experiments to make sure that you're doing different things. I've heard of media agencies who have a score called a continuity score, which is basically how much does the new media plan for this year look similar to the last media plan for the prior year. So there's often a lot of forces at play that are trying to keep people doing the status quo. I imagine that 10% idea of applying 10% to innovation kind of gets thrown out the window with your approach. But being a traditional media buying and media planning shop, you do have to make sure you're using formats that work.
Yeah.
There's got to be a media plan that has scale. Do you guys have a formula, or is every campaign approached in a unique way?
It's approached in a unique way. And I lived through those 10% conversations. I think it was lower than that at one point, but I felt like that was invented. And I think that was that was before Giants. I was seeing that at Omnicom and OMD. We would be fighting to get brands to do that. But that was at a time when we were all talking about emerging media, that there were new platforms to be on. It was when people were just trying to figure out how to be on social media. And when everybody was going to CES and trying to say, what's the next, refrigerator we can put an ad on, and, let's test it and see if it works. I think that time has passed. So now when we think about innovation in a media plan, it's to what I was talking about with House of the Dragon, is how is this innovation? It's not, let's do this innovative thing to experiment and see if there's other things that we can do. It's how is this idea enhancing the media plan? How is this idea going to make the rest of your media more interesting and more impactful for the people who are exposed to it? And I think when we do it through a strategic lens, and then we have data that shows it has worked in the past, and this is how we're going to measure it this time, it's not about putting sort of arbitrary experimental budgets against doing these things. It's about making a business case of why. It's another thing that we say is being boring is bad for business. So if you're gonna just do boring things, you're gonna be ignored. You're gonna be invisible. The world is too noisy and complicated to just, follow that continuity plan year after year. Everyone's gotta battle they're fighting, whether you're a challenger brand who's trying to get bigger, or whether you're a legacy player who's fending off challengers, or you're a DTC and you're scrappy and coming out of the gate. Everyone's got something they're trying. When you're trying to switch change this audience to that audience, there's always something that brands are trying to do to grow their businesses, and you can't do the same things, and you can't be complacent. You've got to be innovative to break through and get noticed.
Yeah. You said something earlier which I thought was interesting about the idea of media as a canvas. And we just talked about House of Dragon, but that's not your first time using the Empire State Building as a canvas. You guys did some pretty exciting work for Netflix around Stranger Things as well, leveraging the Empire State Building, but also lots of other locations around the world. And it's in an interview, I heard you not just talking about the Empire State Building as a amazing opportunity, to basically face half of the city from the perspective of a experiential activation. But I thought it was interesting that you also noticed the social media footprint of the Empire State Building, and that it has a social audience, and that it has it's a multifaceted canvas. It's not just something in the real world. It also has a social component. Can you talk about some of the factors that you guys put into the calculus when you think about, kind of the flagship canvases, if you will, for a campaign, and kind of that 360 approach to it?
Yeah, I mean, congrats to the Empire State Building for turning themselves into a media company.
Yeah, it's wild, right?
Through being clever social media first sort of creator. So they essentially turned themselves into a creator. And just like you would work with other creators, you can work with them, and you have this larger than life scale where you can do things on that canvas that the world is going to notice in a city that's sort of the heart of culture in many ways. So those two things coming together were really powerful for us. I think one of my partners, Trevor, he met somebody at the company that owns the Empire State Building, and they invited him there, and they gave him a tour through the private back way. And then somehow, this goes back to one of your earlier questions that I didn't fully answer. Somehow that tour and him telling people in the company about it, and then there being a brief from Netflix and Stranger Things, and someone had this idea to turn the whole world into the Upside Down from Stranger Things, and then someone remembered that Trevor went into the Empire State Building, and he followed them on social, and you start to connect these dots of like things in your personal life, things in your business life, things you're consuming in culture, a brief that comes in, all of it is dots that we collect that turn into these ideas, and you never really know how it's going to manifest. And you asked earlier about when we were talking about spoon shots. It's actually, we have not a fund for spoon shots. We have what we call a culture fund, which is exactly what you said, which is go do things that you wouldn't have otherwise done. We had to police it because people were like, "Can I buy a PlayStation game? Like, would you have bought a PlayStation game? Would you have bought GTA?" Well, GTA 6 isn't out yet, but when GTA 6 comes out, you would have bought it anyway. So don't use your culture fund for that. But if you go to an opera, go to an art fair, go to Art Basel, like stuff that you wouldn't have done, that's going to help you collect dots in the world, because we think it comes back to us in things like this and back to our clients, and where people are sort of constantly trying to connect dots that don't seem to be related.
Yeah, I love that. I did buy an Xbox during COVID on my expense account at my last agency, but that's because I put together a Final Four NBA 2K tournament during COVID for agency and brands. Because my whole world kind of imploded when I couldn't, take you guys to coffee or lunch and bring in treats anymore. So I had to get really creative as a business development person to figure out, like, how do I engage with agency people when we're all, sequestered in our house?
That's fair play. That's fair. That's fair play for sure.
Yeah. And it was awesome. I'm a gamer now again because of COVID, and, my play Fortnite with my kids, and they're always on, Roblox. So it's a good laboratory to experiment.
Here's a digression for you.
Yeah.
When I've been told that playing Fortnite with your kids is a way to trick them into talking to you and telling you everything about their life, because that's how they're trained to communicate with each other, and it like shuts down the part of their brain that stops them from talking to you when they're playing. So good for you for playing Fortnite with your kids. I think it actually is a sign of really strong parenting.
I love that. Well, it's definitely, I mean, I enjoy it too. So beyond that, but I'm going to keep that tip filed away for when they get just a little bit older. But I wanted to ask you, have you guys I imagine that the Sphere must be on your guys' radar. Have you guys done something with the Sphere yet, or is that a dream canvas to paint on?
It's funny. It's come up so many times. And the people there were nice enough to actually have a few of us out. I got to see you two there with them. And it is amazing. And it really is an insane canvas. I think the problem for us has been the canvas is so great that people are using it and making amazing things for it. So then for us, it's like, what are we going to do that's going to be so different and so unique and so straight, like such a holy shit, I can't believe Giant Spoon did that on the Sphere canvas. It doesn't mean it might not be the right canvas on the right plan and we could use it and do something awesome there. But every time it's come up for the briefs that we get where people want really big PR moments, we're like, how are we going to get a PR moment on the Sphere when everything that appears on the Sphere is so humongous? So how do we do something different? I think when we find the different thing, it'll be great. We haven't figured it out yet, but I'd totally be open to it as a canvas for the right campaign if we have the right idea for it, even if it isn't the thing that like blows everyone's mind that no one's ever done before there.
Yeah, I love that challenger thinking that you guys, won't even approach something unless you can do it differently and make it exciting and make it a buzzworthy moment. I mean, the best uses that I've seen so far are for the experiential events that are tied to like CES or Shop Talk. It's a great place to host a party, that's for sure. So
people have done some amazing stuff.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I wanted to ask you about a another creative philosophy or insight that I heard you talk about, and I thought it was really insightful and an insightful way to not only approach life but definitely approach our industry. You talked about the idea of harnessing your naivete as a superpower that you could put to work amongst you and your teams. Can you talk a little bit more about that and expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah. I actually said it on somewhere and got a little bit of blowback because it was misinterpreted
Hmm.
as that only young people can harness naivete, and I don't think that's true at all. It's of any age and any stage in your career. It's a matter of forgetting all of the things that you say, with that little thing in the back of your mind that says that's been done before, that'll never work. We thought about that 5 years ago. Someone tried that and it didn't work. It's about kind of clearing your mind of all of the things that you know can't work, and being able to kind of go into an opportunity and say, hey, why can't we put a dragon on the Empire State Building? Like, someone might say, we tried to do that 10 years ago and they said no. Okay, well, have you tried today? And so I think that's a little bit of like where being just naive enough to think that you can do something and then trying to figure it out might lead to actually doing something pretty amazing. So it's that, just getting rid of that little voice in the back of your head that knows a little bit too much, or thinks it knows a little bit too much.
Yeah, I love that. It's not really an age thing. Of course, I think it's smart when people, have a multi-generational team working on projects because like you mentioned, we come from different media channels that we experience different content, different creators, different podcasts, all up and down the generational hierarchy, I suppose. But at the end of the day, it's more of like a mindset. It almost feels very like Eastern to me, like, you're meditating, you're clearing your mind from like all the noise and all the BS that's like coming at you, and you're just trying to open up space for ideas to come to you that might not be accessible if you don't have an open mind. So
For
I
sure. I
find
mean, I find myself all the time. Like I've been in an innovation role in the ad agency world for 24 years or something, and I've seen a lot of ideas in that time. And so when I'm sitting in a creative review, it's easy for me to go, oh, you know, that's we thought of that 15 years ago, and but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, I stop myself from doing it, and so I'm just yes anding people and seeing how we can build it and saying, hey, you know what? Let's go try. Let's go see what they say. Let's go see if we can turn that thing that's not for sale into a media canvas. And I think that that willingness is really part of our culture, and I think everyone at the agency embraces it, and it's what gets everyone excited. Like, they when they get to go do something that breaks through what they would ordinarily get to do in a traditional environment, everyone's excited to come to work.
Does that lead very naturally into the idea of an expansive mindset? Is that kind of two sides to the same card, or is there more to unpack around the idea of having an expansive mindset?
It's part of it. It's what I talked about with the dot collecting. It's breaking up your routine, take a different commute to work, go to a part of town you wouldn't normally go to, uh, change your creative process, like blow it up and try to do it in a new way. Use an AI tool. Don't use it, write it in pencil on a piece of paper. Like, breaking routine is another part of it. These are tools that creative people of all disciplines can use to kind of be more expansive in the way they think. And then for us, what that leads to is expansive ideas, which are I was talked about a lot with the data that we're starting to unpack for things like the work for HBO and House of the Dragon. But that data is telling us that when we do things that are expansive, and the way we define that is unusual formats, things that are really disruptive and breakthrough, using media channels in new ways, or different lengths of things, new technologies, and weaving them in with traditional advertising, with social, with influencer, with campaign work, and having them work together is more expansive. And that expansiveness is how brands can create a lot of doors for people to come in, and a lot of ways for people to fall in love with that brand for being unique and interesting and not boring. So that's kind of what expansiveness is as an output. And then we try to nurture expansive thinking with our teams and in our culture.
As a creative leader, how do you pull creativity out of your team?
A lot of it for me personally is the yes and. I think people have maybe experienced in other jobs in the industry where you sort of pitch and you either get, that's a good idea, that's a bad idea. My instinct is to always just build and add to people's ideas and push them and say, what if you did more? What if you did this? Do you think about that? How would it work if this happened? And I think that's part of our culture too, is just yes-anding and building. I mean, obviously ideas have to die at some point, and the best ones have to rise to the top, but that's part of the culture. And then all of the tools that we talk about with our culture fund and expansiveness and all of that is part of our nurturing of creativity. And then we also, you talked about it in the beginning, making everyone feel that there is genuine truth in creativity can come from anywhere. How does a media person to us is a creative person. An experiential designer is a creative person. An experiential producer is a creative person. And if you're in the creative department, you're clearly a creative person. And strategists are creative people. And if we all believe that, and we create this sort of breathing process, we call it sort of expand and contract, where all of those people can come together and talk about a business challenge or a brief, and then go apart and do the things that they've spent their 10,000 hours becoming experts at, and then come back together and share those things. That living and breathing process allows everyone to kind of bring their creativity to the forefront and creates a more expansive product for the agency.
I love that. The idea of yes and, I know that comes from improv acting too. Like, you know, you never shut down an improv. You always build and iterate onto it. Is that part of your background at all?
No, but I'm not the first one to kind of bring that into the advertising zeitgeist, but it's something that I use a lot. There's actually a funny, I think the South Park guys have really talked about this storytelling technique of, it's not yes and, it's sort of like, but then this happens, and it like completely blows up the train of thought, which also brings out really interesting and creative things. So there's some interesting to yes but as well, as long as it's not, people use that to kind of destroy ideas, but it's more like, what if this crazy thing happened, and moves the story along in a totally unexpected direction is another cool technique to bring to the creative process.
That's cool. I heard another story that you won a piece of business with HP that then ended up becoming a long-term relationship because you met a marketing executive who was doing a thought experiment, and he was trying to say yes to as many things as possible. Yeah. I'm wondering, did this kind of modality of thinking come before that? Did you manifest that into existence? Or was that something that you kind of noticed and it was very impactful on you, and then that was a continuation?
I'll tell you, that was very impactful. I mean, I have never done, so the short version of the story is that in the first year of the agency, I got introduced to one of the top marketing execs at HP, Vic Batra, who later became the global CMO. And Vic now has an AI consultancy, which everyone should check out. He's a good guy, and I own one. I met him for lunch and just sort of pitched the philosophy of Giant Spoon. He said, this was on a Friday, and he goes, okay, I like it. I have a brief for you. Can you guys start Monday? Yes, of course we can. So we did, and then we ended up working with them, for pretty much a decade, and
Wow.
did some of the best work of the. We won Cannes Lions, we won Effies. We built our creative practice and production practice around the work that we were doing for them in the early years. We've worked with A-list celebrities and directors. Like, it was just led to so much amazing things. And I later found out that Vic was doing a thought experiment that week or month. I think it was that month. But he's calling the month of yes, where he just said yes to anything anyone pitched to him that month. And honestly, if that hadn't have happened, as you look at like the butterfly effect or the chain of events, I don't know that our agency would have really grown to be as successful as we've become today, because so much of it was built on the early work we not only, but a lot of the early work that we did was built on that work that we did for HP. So it was super powerful for us, and I probably should do it now. I should probably pay it back by doing the same thing Vic did.
I like it.
10,
Well,
10 plus years.
let me know when you start that month or week. I'll know when to call you. Yeah, that's awesome. I interviewed Casey Herbis, who was the CMO of Rocket Mortgage for many years and is now the CMO of MGM Bet. And he told me that's kind of their culture at Rocket. It's a culture of yes. They do so many interesting things across the Rocket family because when people bring them ideas, it's generally, how do we do this versus how do we not say no to it? So I think there's something to be learned from a culture of yes. Like, there's probably ways that you have to think about, putting that into practice practically. But I've heard, there's Guy Kawasaki is another, great thought leader, podcaster, written so many books. He operates from that philosophy. Why wouldn't I do a podcast, with somebody who reaches out to me and figured out how to get me like more? And he truly believes that more good things have happened in his life from that philosophy. So I love that. That wasn't the direction that I expected this podcast to go, but I think it's a really, really cool philosophy and pretty practical, grounded outcomes for you guys, I think, that we've seen. So you mentioned something else, 10-year run with Hewlett Packard, 10-year run with GE, multiple reoccurring work with HBO. You guys seem to have a track record of decade-long account retention that is very coveted in our space. I did 8 years with Adobe, which I'm very proud of. That was an exciting run. What's the secret to longevity with an account?
I think the way we got in with these big brands in our early days was by giving them something they weren't getting from their big creative agencies and their big media agencies. And it meant proactive thinking. It meant bringing them gifts. It meant giving them ideas that they didn't ask for and ideas that they didn't expect, and not just checking boxes on a brief. And I think that's part of our culture and how we interact with our clients. And that creates a certain amount of longevity and trust and excitement about working together. So that's been a big part of our longevity with those clients. So it goes back to Spoonshots too, like that culture of giving gifts and bringing things and doing things that are beyond what their normal expectations are. And that's been powerful for us. I mean, we have quite a bit of project work too, and we treat every project like it could be the next long-term ongoing relationship, and that's paid off for us as well.
That's awesome. In a world that is more frequently trying to discredit or dismantle the traditional, agency pitch, put a bunch of teams in a room and kind of have a Donald Trump apprentice style, boardroom style, blood sport. I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, I've always operated from the perspective of you that you got to put in, work to show what you can do. There's also been a lot of discussion around, who owns the ideas when you do stuff like that. Can companies just take your ideas and run with them? But it sounds like, you just think of it from the perspective of, the world is abundant, ideas are currency, but if you kind of, lock them in a box and put too much value in a single idea, then, that doesn't really give a lot of opportunity for these kind of, magic moments of doing something just out of pure excitement for a brand that you don't know whether they're going to buy it or not. And you don't even know whether they're going to steal it or not. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think the way I was talking about it was the gifts that we give to existing clients, but we certainly have done those gifts for non-existing clients as ways to get into the ecosystem with them. So what you said is totally fair. And then with pitching and giving away ideas and all of that, it's part of it. I understand the pushback. I think for us, and it's not exactly what you asked, but we've been saying no to a lot more, but for the purpose of saying yes, that we will pitch for the big right things. And I think what clients have, what we try to sift through is it real? Do they really want to change? Do they really want different thinking? Do they really have a budget to do it? What's the duration and that they have to be able to pursue something new and a new way of working? And if all of those factors are there, I'm willing to pitch, and we'll throw our heart and soul into it. I think when we've been burned, it's when people would run those types of pitches and we would jump into it out of just like being enamored by some cool brand, but they weren't. They didn't really mean it. The client didn't really mean it. I think that's when I really have felt burned. And we try to sniff those things out ahead of time now.
Yeah.
And it's never 100%.
So discretion and chemistry and right fit. So the important thing is, saying yes to the right pitches and not saying yes to every pitch.
Yeah. That I think it's a hard lesson for agencies, and we learned it. It took us a lot of years of mistakes to learn it. But it's not, you never get it 100% right, but we're trying to be really, really thoughtful about it.
I love that. So, tell me a little bit more about the Clio you just won on Ritual.
Ritual's a cool brand. I don't know if you know it. They're
a female nutrition brand, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah. They have men's too. Get the men's multi for yourself.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember them going into the crossing over.
But Ritual was an exciting one for us because it was full service. So we were able to do creative and media for Ritual. It was a pitch, and we did win a competitive pitch for that one, and it was worth it. And they're a brand who, from the founder all the way down to their culture, is willing to take risks and push boundaries and do different stuff. And they wanted to tell a story about traceability because they really invented and are one of the most aggressive brands about showing where every single ingredient in their supplements came from, down to like the local farm it was grown on. So every single ingredient is completely traceable. And they came to us and said, how do we tell that story, and how do we explain why it matters without scaring people about competitors who aren't being as transparent about what's in their products. And so we had this insight that nobody cares as much about what comes into their home or their bodies or their family's bodies than mothers. And mothers are putting in an incredible amount of invisible work to protect their families, whether it's studying organic, and organic doesn't matter with bananas because they've got peels on. Like, there's just so much information that moms have to track. And Ritual is founded by a mother, and their first product was a prenatal vitamin, even though they have many other products now. And so we came up with this idea of like, moms go hard, and if you're going to trace your ingredients, you should trace it like a mother. So we had this sort of like trace like a motherfucker vibe to the campaign, and the billboards had the fucker sort of blocked out by the pill, and the mom in the spot was like this Ali Wong from Beef kind of mom who's just cursing and like getting in fights with moms in the pickup at school, but then like taking amazing care of her kids at the same time, and it was funny. And then we did the media plan for that and really pushed it out in a lot of different places and different forms and formats. And it lived on social and it had its own life there. And it just picked up a Clio. So we're really excited about that. Super effective campaign too. I think it's one that should be able to win some effectiveness awards as well. But we always there's another thing that's important to us of like this cost to courage index. And if your budget isn't massive in terms of your media scale, you've got to be even more courageous. And being able to say something that's sort of pretty close to saying motherfucker in your ad campaign was, I know it's cursing, but it was built on a deep strategic insight, is the type of courage that's going to make your campaign work even harder.
I love it. Well, I know moms appreciate that, that real portrayal of what it's like to be a mom. I think the glossy Instagram, super mom with the perfectly cleaned house and everything's tidy and, normal looking. I think that aesthetic in those days are kind of come and gone. I think people want more real. At least, that's the way that's the things that I think my wife responds to for sure. So I don't think we would be, I think I would need to ask you, I know it's a trite question, but with a shop that is so steeped in innovation, I feel like I'd be missing an opportunity if I didn't ask you about what are you excited about on the innovation side as it pertains to making agencies more effective, as it pertains to AI?
Yeah. AI is, I'm massively obsessed with it on every level. We have a task force in the agency that is looking at it from a legal standpoint, from an operations standpoint, resource management, scope writing, all of the operations of the agency. And then we have already subscribed to at least a half a dozen AI tools for strategists, for research, for creatives, for image generation and design, and for media as well. So I think it's kind of changing everything. I think the opportunity for an agency like ours is where AI still has a long runway to disrupt one of the core offerings of this agency, which is really unexpected, disruptive, high-level thinking. How we then produce that thinking and put it out into the world, that might change dramatically pretty quickly. Because right now, from a digital production and asset production, and really with Google VO this week, video production at a real high level is on the table as well. It's not there yet. We're doing some stuff with it that's stunty and funny, but when's the point? When is the point of like when it becomes like that's how we produce our content? And I know it affects jobs and it affects craftsmen, and it's really kind of a very tricky place to be, but we've got to be constantly educating all the different workflows of the agency on what the tools are. And the thing is we're subscribing to some of these tools, and then those tools go out of business, and then there's a new one. Like we signed up for a scope writing tool, and we were starting to experiment with it, and then it just went away. And so now there's 10 other scope writing tools. So it's still really Wild West, and I think that's what's going to buy us all some time to figure it out, is that there's not really clean solutions for things. It's a cobbling together of many different solutions that requires expertise and human intelligence to do it in a way that is of significant quality and craft.
Yeah, I think you brought up something interesting that I haven't given a lot of thought to, but in the world of this AI, headless coding, being able to build an MVP in a weekend, now how are you going to trust like that the companies, with that level of startup resources to get something off the ground, how are you going to know that the company, raised money, hired a development? There used to be like a bar that had to be passed to at least get a product to MVP. And now that bar is so low that you don't know what's behind it and whether that's going to be, around in a week or two because of how fast you can bring products to market. So
Yeah.
a new problem we all have to do with vendor identification and SaaS businesses. But all right,
I'll tell you what,
yeah,
Dylan, the messiness is what protects the human part of it.
yeah,
And I was reading, I don't know if I read something or I saw a TikTok, but the reason consultancies, like the big consultancies, have a problem because their output are these very strategic presentations with a bunch of data and analysis. That's a very like linear, clean process to get to that thing. It still takes a lot of smart people doing smart things to get there, but it's a clean process. Our creative process is a messy dot collecting explosion of weird things that have to happen magically for every brand and every brief that has a different output every time. That's going to be a little bit harder for there to be a clean singular AI solution to replace. Yeah, an AI solution could take like a DTC and build them a logo and build them some copy and then build them some social assets and then run a media plan on Meta. Yes, you could do that. But when we're talking about really disruptive, big brand building thinking, that's messy and AI is not there yet.
yeah. And I think actually the proliferation of AI. I don't know if you're at the Possible show in Miami, and I'm sure this will be a theme at Cannes. There's actually a swing back, I feel like, to investing in brand because, performance and AI and kind of AI creativity, I think is kind of getting tapped out on one side of the spectrum. So, if you're not investing in the brand halo and creating a brand that people care about, then none of those other things are going to work.
Yeah,
Interesting.
100% agree.
I love it. Well, hey, we've come up on the hour. I'm going to ask you one more question, two more questions. So, is there a canvas that you haven't got the opportunity to paint on yet that is in your dream set? Is there something in mind that you're really excited about, but you haven't got an opportunity to leverage it yet?
Yeah, I'll give you one that kind of goes against everything I've said. Is we haven't done a Super Bowl spot yet, and
Oh, wow.
I hope when we do it in a way that's extremely disruptive and unique, kind of like the Sphere conversation we had. But that's a little bit of a white whale for me. That I would really like to play with that canvas and do something exciting there.
Yeah, well, I'm sure when you guys get the opportunity, it's going to be breakthrough and exciting. All right, last question. What are you most excited about the future of the work you guys are doing at Giant Spoon?
We have some stuff coming out in the next few months that's of the biggest scale of talent that we've ever worked with before.
Wow.
And I wish I could tell you. I can't yet. I would be fired. But it's both creative talent that worked on it with us as collaborators that are just of the highest possible caliber. And I can't wait to put that into the world. And I think it'll be something people will be surprised who think of Giant Spoon as one thing to see that we're able to do something so different and so big. So I'm really excited about that level of talent collaboration we have coming up soon.
I love it. Well, you'll have to come on yourself or send somebody from the team. I've talked to Ian before, so I always love having you guys on. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. If anybody at home wants to learn more about the agency or connect with you directly, where should they go?
My LinkedIn is probably the best place. Jonathan Haber, I think, on LinkedIn, and then DM me there, and we're happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, for everybody who's following along at home, don't forget to subscribe or follow or do whatever the social things are, whatever platform you happen to be watching or listening today. If you give us an honest review, that's how the show finds a bigger audience organically. And last but not least, if there is somebody out there in ad land, if there is a marketer who you think needs to shake up their thinking by being more expansive, or if there is somebody who you think needs to do a thought experiment and say yes to something for a month, don't forget to share the show with them. And with that, we'll be back again soon. Jonathan, thanks again. Appreciate you coming on, man.